is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl, episode number 6667. I mean 67.
667. So, a 20-year-old Michigan woman was declared dead, but she wasn't dead, and now she's dead. Basically, she wasn't breathing so well. Her name was Tamisha Beauchamp. And the family says, oh, she's not breathing. She has cerebral palsy. She was kind of fucked up to begin with, unfortunately. But she wasn't breathing so well. And then a whole team of paramedics came. And they're like, no, dead. She's absolutely dead. And I didn't realize they do this, but I guess paramedics can call the doctor, and the doctor can determine if someone's dead without seeing them themselves, because that's what fucking happened. Sure enough, brought back to the hospital. This is in the city of Detroit. After being in a body bag, a airtight body bag for 4 hours, they were basically about to, what's the shit they pump into a corpse again?
Formaldehyde.
Yeah, well, yeah, but it was something else too. But yeah, sure. And then just before all that, the guy that does that, I don't even know what the official job title is, but her eyes...
A corpse lubricator.
Yeah, I guess so. Her eyes perked up. She started moving. He's like, oh my God, she's fucking alive. Then they call the parents and said, hey, she's alive. And then she died because basically she was so brain dead from lack of oxygen. So now the family is suing the city of Detroit for $50 million.
Well, I don't know if I blame them, but Michigan is not having a good week. The University of Michigan, and again, back to these, you're going to college and you're this frickin' stupid. 1,000 cases of COVID at the University of Michigan. They had to close the schools down because...
In Ann Arbor, I assume.
People are not listening.
Right.
But, okay, and some kind of positive, if there is such a thing, how could there be any positive COVID news when more than 1.1 million people worldwide have died and, well, 8.2 million in this country have it? At last count.
Right, and Europe's just shutting down day by day now. Right
Absolutely.
Now.
And, we're next. So Anika Sherbrulu from Frisco, Texas, a 14-year-old gal who hasn't even graduated from middle school, just won a $25,000 award for research related to a potential cure for COVID-19. And she won the prestigious 3M Young Scientist Challenge she's trying to develop a molecule that's going to break up the effects of COVID. So when asked about what was she going to do with the reward money, she said that she plans to contribute some to a nonprofit that she created called Academy Aid, which is great, helps other students pursue STEM research. And I say they should also pursue stem cell research. And the rest of the money, she said, would be used to contribute to the research in creating an effective antiviral drug. Let's hand it to the 14-year-old.
Yeah, just the young generation is so gutted financially and just everything's so ruined. I think when I read baby boomers, something had like, if you include inflation and stuff, something like 3 to 4 times the amount. A 30-year-old who's a baby boomer had 3 to 4 times the amount than a 30-year-old does now. So it's amazing that when you see young people just like, you know what, it doesn't fucking matter. I'm giving back. That's what matters.
What do I tell people when they ask, any advice to young musicians or artists? I'm like, yeah, don't do it. Become a doctor, go into chemistry, make some new drugs, become an architect. This is the stuff we need. Just saying.
Sure. Well, what we definitely don't need in this world is former candidate for governor of Idaho, Steve Pankey, who's arrested for the 1984 death of Janelle Matthews, whose head was blown off. And I think it's through DNA research, DNA evidence and all stuff. But basically the word was he was obsessed with this 12-year-old. I don't know. He's like looking at her leaving school, going through school. So then she disappears. And, Steve Pankey's ex-wife is like, 2 days before Christmas, he's like, we're going to go see my parents in California for Christmas. Like, really? That's a last-second thing. He just got the fuck out of town. And on the way back, he was obsessed with her disappearance, listening on the radio. And then he made his ex-wife dig a ditch. She's like, something's up. And then the next day, he set his car on fire.
There was nothing suspicious all those years ago. And
well, 36 years, exactly. I don't know what the fuck.
I mean, look, really, Forensic Files hasn't improved DNA testing that much. There was still evidence of a crime committed.
Well, he didn't win the election.
He didn't win the Mensa Award that year.
But he categorizes himself as a Christian conservative. So I'd like to talk about what's going on in France with this teacher that got decapitated. I mean, this is really insane. And what it was is, and it reminded me, because I was in France when that whole massacre happened. It was in Paris when
the Eagles of Death Metal were playing.
Yeah. But what the French had the footage of getting the suspect, this Chechen kid, and I guess he probably did it, but I don't know. They don't seem to take it to court. They just blow you away. So, there's like a video. They're like, okay, there's his house. And then bam, 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 bam. And they did the same thing with one of the guys associated or women associated with that shooting at the Eagles of Death Metal show. And I just don't really know how the French system works. I guess if you're just a suspect, they can just, their special services just come up and blow you away. I guess they do that here too.
Excuse me. At least you have to be a suspect. Here, all you have to do is be driving while black or walking down the street while black, and immediately it's just cause for absolute demolition. So at least they might have a reason to blow you up in France. Not sure, but is there really a reason to cut somebody's head off in a classroom? A classroom.
The teacher was doing a whole thing about current events, and I think he was talking about that Hebdo magazine of that naked Muhammad little illustration, and I guess some people really go nuts when that thing's fucking shown. So basically this Chechen kid who's like 17, 18, didn't like his teacher, so he ratted on the teacher to this girl's dad who's super devout Islamic Muslim, and then they got each other all pepped up and like, oh, this guy sucks, so he decided to go to school and decapitate him.
Well, shit is to fear what might be coming here. Another reason, I think, to get a nanny cam on your front door is in Frederick, Maryland. Law enforcement officials announced Wednesday that a Maryland man was arrested a couple of days ago for threatening to kidnap and kill Biden and Harris. Ooh. Now, he left a handwritten note on his neighbor's door that had a Biden-Harris campaign poster. And the note said in part, "We are the ones with the scary guns. We are the ones your children have nightmares about." No, asshole, you're the one that got arrested because there's a nanny cam, and I suggest everybody have one on their door for the coming season of violence for no absolute reason against just your next door neighbor because you're a fucking idiot and a possible incel.
These people are morons, and they're getting all revved up. Speaking of revved up, Trump's been really revved up. He's furious about this.
Adderall is really kicking in.
Maybe. He's furious about and steroids, actually. Steroids and Adderall seems like to be what his cocktail of everyday function.
I just read an article by a neurosurgeon today that said his leaning forward and his occasional right arm, which just twitches, is probably a sign of Alzheimer's, dementia.
Maybe.
Maybe? Have you heard the guy talk?
Well, Biden's not exactly. His cognitive skills aren't the best either.
Well, I'm really looking forward to Friday when Sacha Baron Cohen's new Borat subsequent movie film will be released, which has a nice little clip of Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah.
Who is being, Baron Cohen set him up. Here's a conservative female journalist reporter interviewing him. And after the interview, let's go up to my hotel room, she invites him. The idiot Rudy goes.
What a moron.
And the next thing you know, his hands are down his pants, probably trying to find the dick he once had, and now he's just dickless, the idiot.
Pocket pool?
The thing is, he sucks so much of Trump's dick, he probably lost his own. So that's...
Well, he must be going nuts about that, just like Trump's going nuts about this Leslie Stahl interview for 60 Minutes on Sunday. I guess he stormed off, and he had a temper tantrum. He's threatening to send his edits, which, of course...
Oh, can't wait.
Yeah, no one really
Look, the only person Trump likes to hear talk about him is himself.
Yes,
pretty much. Everybody else is the enemy. The enemy as fake news is He turned on all of them.
Will he like to hear himself? Because if he loses, and a lot of people are discussing what happens if he loses. Some people say he will go to Russia, maybe another country. Basically, I mean,
well, he's going to have to get out of this country because there's going to be so many lawsuits against him.
Well, not according to Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon thinks he'll run again in 2024 if he loses. Of course, a lot of people think he's going to start a TV network. Scaramucci says he's not going to be able to emotionally handle the humiliation and public loss. He's just going to
wither and die,
pretty
little
much.
Mushroom between his legs.
Pretty much is basically what they're saying.
Christ. Okay, speaking about things between one's legs.
Yes.
Thursday, that would be this Thursday, a 400-page transcript of interviews conducted with that sex trafficker, Ghislaine, as I like to call her, Maxwell.
Oh, boy.
That references her former boyfriend that murdered, or probably not suicided, pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, and contains numerous intimate details about her sex life. And it's going to be made public. It will be for public consumption.
You told me, Lydia, that the rumor is that Bill Clinton had a real boner for her and was really.
We had a boner for everybody.
Well, sure. Well, so basically, she's afraid, she's for her life here. I mean, so Pat Robertson,
another good
TV,
Christian.
Yes, he TV evangelical. God talked to him this week, and
wait, who?
According to him, God talked to him. And said
his grandfather who wears a white robe and floats above him at night when he's dreaming of heaven. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, I guess he leaned into his ear and said, "Hey, Pat."
Teenage Jesus motherfucking Christ.
He said, "Hey, Pat, I'm here to tell you Trump's going to win." And so he reassured his fan base that Trump's going to win. Yeah. But unfortunately, there's a sad ending. He claims God also told him in 5 years an asteroid would hit Earth, and it's pretty much going to be the end of all of humanity.
Well, it reminds me of one of my favorite David Bowie songs, 5 years, stuck on my mind, 5 years. What a surprise. 5 years, my brain hurts a lot. 5 years, that's all we got? Really?
So the latest heist in bank robberies are a bunch of raccoons in Redwood City, the Redwood City Bank.
They're not called bandits for nothing.
Well, they got in and I had raccoons in my last apartment where those things are tricky. They're clever.
That's really not a nice term for your roommates.
Well, no. Well, the thing about the problem when you have raccoons in your ceilings or walls, those things are nocturnal, as we all know, and so
were your roommates.
Yes, but they would fucking make a lot of fucking noise, especially if another raccoon got in there. They'd fuck it all up. And basically any mammal, because the moms go in there to have their babies, and any mammal, female mammal with babies, will fuck you up if you get close to it. The problem with raccoons being around is they have that raccoon roundworm in their shit, and the problem is if you somehow get it in you, like kids, they're playing in the yard because their shit will dehydrate and just looks like rotten, dried up leaves, and they put it in their mouth. The thing basically burrows in your brain, and you're a vegetable.
It's just another reason to have children, isn't it?
But these raccoons, they kept on breaking in. They got through the roof. They have this high security, or somewhat high security bank branch, and these things keep on managing to get in there. They're not stealing the money. They're just going and just fucking everything up.
Now, Tim, I've never seen you wear one, but for a while, a few years ago, it was very popular to wear around one's neck a raccoon penis bone.
Oh, I remember that. Well, raccoons... it
wasn't very big, and I don't know if it was a sign for things yet to come, like, ooh, I got my raccoon penis bone.
Well, supposedly...
I got my donkey tail butt plug.
Oh, God. Well, it's better.
Got my leather mat, but...
It's better than wearing like a fucking...
Mute me.
Better than wearing an elephant. Well, never mind. All right, so Benjamin Franklin, when he dealing with the French and trying to get money from them, Revolutionary War, and we owed them a lot of money after the Revolutionary War, and he was diplomat, and he had to go and deal with all this stuff. He was clever. He was like, the French dress so well, I'll never really be able to impress them, so I'm going to turn up the exotic perception of an American here. So he would show up in Paris with a raccoon hat on, and they'd all be like, "Woo!"
Davy Crockett?
Yeah. Well, they fell for it. They thought it was really cool, and he was the real deal. And of course, he was super rich. But there was a famous story where he was wearing his raccoon. He was wearing the raccoon hat. And
I wish he was wearing the raccoon tail on the back of his pantaloons.
Well, maybe, but anyhow, there's a story. You're kind of cock blocking this, but sometimes you're swinging big. I get it. So
I got a big one. I got to swing it. Go ahead, Tim.
So it's after the Revolutionary War, and we owe France a shitload of fucking money, and they're demanding America pays them back, and it was a real tense moment, and supposedly Benjamin Franklin let out a giant fart. And basically the whole place exploded in laughter, and somehow they all loved him more, and he got what he wanted. We can edit that one.
Better one giant fart than to have a brain and mouth full of shit, as we've been putting up with for the past 4 fucking years. Look, by all reasonable thought, this asshole should be voted out, taken out in a straitjacket, and put straight into the big house from out of the White House, go to prison for the rest of his life with his dumb, malicious, corrupt, slumlord kids, all in orange, because he is the orange man. But whether or not that's going to happen, because, look, of course, everybody should vote. Oh, if only we could vote.
41 million have already voted.
Yeah, if only we could vote 2 times.
That's not a good sign for him, actually.
It's not. But then again, you know what? Do you believe in their numbers? Do you believe who's counting it? They have so many dirty tricks to try to undermine, as they did with the Postal Service and installing that corrupt idiot in. DeJoy, I want to
drop boxes have been set on fire. I mean, it's
fake drop boxes. So I mean, the fraud,
fake ones. Okay.
The fraud that Trump has been espousing is shit that is being perpetrated by his followers.
Yeah, well, I mean, they got the numbers so wrong in 2016. We'll see what happens now. I mean, I don't fucking know.
I wish the mute button that they're going to use would be like a disappearance button.
It should be the mute button when they talk, and then totally turn up the gain on the other one being like grunting and like.
I can't help but think about the good old days, like in the Middle Ages, where they just would have pushed a button and he would have gone straight into a fucking pit with 6-foot-high stakes and made it to the human shit kebab, which he is. Anyway, anything else?
The Iron Maiden was that like kind of like little coffin thing you go into full of spikes and they just like close it on you like.
Yeah. I've always favored the anal pair, but that's only on a Saturday night when you're at my house, Tim.
Whoa! Oh gosh, not that again.
Oh, Heidi, you're used to it by now.
Oh gosh. Ooh.
I know it's tickling you, isn't it? Okay, I don't know where to go with this.
All right, well, we got to introduce our guest, Mark Ames,
a controversial figure.
To some people, when we talked to him, he seemed pretty level-headed.
Absolutely reasonable. I'm really interested in checking out his podcast, Radio War Nerd. He started as a controversial figure more than 20 years ago with his magazine Exile that he did out of Moscow. But, boys will be boys, and they're often kind of fucking irritating, dumb, misogynist, all the things I've been called as well. I think he's pretty intelligent, and he's got some interesting things to say, and I'm very glad you insisted we had him on the show.
Yes. He's a talent, and for people that are interested in facts and current affairs, he's one that is knowledgeable in the right ways. He's not paid by some other interests to basically have an agenda here. He basically wants to be honest.
Wants to tell the truth as far as he can dig into it, and whatever the truth means, at least he's going in as far as anybody can without being in real exile at this point. So I think with no further ado, we need to bring on Mark Ames. Good evening. This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Mark Ames, a quite controversial figure who was the editor for the biweekly The Exile, Out of Moscow with Matt Taibbi, written for Harper's, Playboy, GQ, Russia, The Nation, various other things. And his most outlandish early works were eventually published by Grove Atlantic, no small feat, and now runs Radio Nerd.
Radio War Nerd.
And I love that title. Welcome, Mark Ames.
Thanks for having me on. I'm actually a big, longtime fan.
Of what?
Of yours.
Doing what?
God.
Fan of my what?
Of your freaking music. I mean, Death Valley 69 had a major effect on me as a
Well,
kid.
you must be a mini Mansonite, I guess.
I am, yeah.
Aren't we?
I was rooting for him in that, Tarantino film, but.
Of our generation, we are kind of, you're a little bit younger than I am, but I really do feel that the Manson murders, the Vietnam War, Kent State, Nixon, all of that really did influence not only our worldview, but in a sense, our humor.
Yeah, more our humor. I mean, to be honest, as a serious person now, the Manson thing actually fucked me up as a kid. I grew up in California, near the coast in the South Bay, kind of near Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz was the serial capital of the world for a while, and
serial killer capital.
Serial killer capital. I'm sorry, yeah, of the world for a while. They had like 4 or 5 going at once in the early 70s when I was a kid. And it just made me feel. It made you feel very insecure and terrified, and really turned me against hippies, which maybe the man wanted that to happen. Huh?
Well, I'm going to share my kind of horror thing. Besides the Mansons, before he was caught for being one of the Hillside Stranglers, Kenneth Bianchi was committing lust murders of young girls in my hometown. And he wasn't caught doing that. And it would be on the news. And he actually was doing like a map of their bodies. And this was another part of the horror of my youth.
Yeah.
We have a few things in common. Some of the things we have in common besides that is we've both been called some of the same things. We've both been called misogynist, racist, sexist, infantile, rude, etc. That's more about your early work, though.
Yeah. I mean, what's if you're not pissing people off, like, what are you doing?
Honey, I've got no choice. I haven't, consciously been pissing them off. They just get pissed off. I want to talk about that early stuff I'm the nicest girl you'll maybe meet. Do you live in Brooklyn?
No, I'm in Rochester. As I understand,
you're in my hometown?
Yeah.
Are you stalking my ghost?
I know. Yeah, I am. No, I'm in Rochester now.
Why?
It's a long story, but it all started way back in the pandemic. For a bunch of reasons, we got out. We were living in Queens, and my family I had 2 kids, and one of the kids was susceptible to
everything.
Yeah, and I mean, both of them were, but one of them in particular. And I just got him. I rented a van and got the fuck out, and we just started looking for Airbnbs because a farm I was supposed to go stay on, the farm fell through, and we just kind of bounced from one place to another, wound up in Rochester, and actually liked it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it when I was growing up there. It was very different, though. But so have you been to the House of Guitars?
No.
Oh, you have to go. But it's very bizarre when anybody ends up in Rochester.
Yeah. I've noticed since coming here, I keep sort of running into people for different reasons. I mean, the pandemic is really kind of reordering a lot of things where people are living and sort of what they're doing. And I've actually run into more than a few people who moved out here from California.
And what about Kodak? They've been in the news recently, right?
Yeah, doing well, man. Yeah, it's a good pandemic for
First
them.
time in a while.
Yeah, because you drive and like down in sort of central Rochester, and you see these like giant rusted old, factory like remains, and suddenly now, I mean, I guess Trump is getting some of this kickback, or some of his people are, but yeah, they're. It's a good pandemic for some people.
When I was a kid growing up, though, they had so many great rock concerts. It was really a great place to live, and which, of course, inspired me to also get the hell out of there. But I have been back a lot recently, but you have to check out the House Guitars because that's just a story unto itself. It will be, you need to investigate. So what's the latest for you right now? What's going on, bud?
For me, this was a pretty epic move, with kids and family and getting out. We had been living in New York, for many years, and it was exhausting. I don't know what else to put. It's really fucking exhausting. Like, you see in the zombie movies, the apocalypse hits and you pack the kids in the van and you take off for whatever place, your island or something. And it looks like they don't film all the really long, dull, exhausting parts. And that's what it really is.
You've lived in many cities. I mean, I've been a nomad. I've lived in many cities. I moved often, but I'm only moving myself. When you're moving a whole family, it's a different situation.
Yeah, it is. Exactly. And, and you're just, I was used for a long time to thinking about myself, and now I just constantly worry about these kids. It just, and everything about it just panics me and freaks me out.
I heard some stories about, because I'm not a breeder, so I'm always curious when people are, but I just in my slight research about you, I can't wait to do more. That when one of your partners became pregnant and wouldn't have an abortion, you threatened to kill her. I mean, I'm always threatening 3 vasectomies. I mean, none of the women in my coven dare or deem to breed because it's so expensive. It's just such a contaminated place. And we want it to end here, if only. Why did you suddenly decide, after your initial hatred of breeding, to let your seed and sperm flourish?
It's a good question. I mean, well, I should say that story was, let's say, exaggerated for effect. Let's say, but the truth is that I definitely did not, didn't really like children or babies, and didn't want to have them.
I love children and babies. Yeah, I just can't stand their fucking mothers for the most part. But go on.
I really didn't, to be honest. And
but you like your own. Do you like?
No. I
like your own?
I actually adore them now that I have one finally. And my wife basically put a gun to my head and said, like, shit or get off the pot. And
that's what they tend to do these days. Yeah. But I do hope it was a literal gun and not a figurative gun. But I'm just.
Believe me, my wife is scary. Yes, it was a literal.
If it would have been me, I would have put a gun. I would.
So.
Of course she is.
Around,
I would have put a gun to your head and saying, vasectomy now, motherfucker. But that's, I'm not here to spread.
And I would have done it. And
I would have done it for you, honey. I mean, look, it's only 6 inches. You just got to stick something far enough up there. Anyway, Tim Dahl, how you doing? Jump right in.
Well, it's so you run out of New York City during this the heat of the pandemic. Of course, that's kind of ground zero in the beginning for the Americans. But you've had to run out of cities before, right? I mean, when you left Moscow, what I've read and what I've heard is that basically there was a lot of pressure, I guess, from Putin. I don't know, Kremlin. I don't know who's putting pressure. Was it a subtle get the fuck out, or was it? Tell me what that story is about.
I mean, it was bound to happen at some point. And they had kind of stomped on us in different ways in the past. Actually, Matt once did get stomped when I was out of the country.
Can you just go back a little bit about that? Like, what year did you go to Moscow, and how long were you there for? And when did your exile happen, please?
So I went there in fall of 1993. Right when I got there, in the neighborhood I was in, suddenly Yeltsin, he had disbanded the democratically elected parliament with U.S. backing, and then brought in tanks and bombed it to smithereens, the parliament. And that was followed up, I think, a day or two later by Clinton's foreign secretary coming and offering billions in loans, as a reward. Because the parliament was, I mean, they were no angels, but they thought that the extreme neoliberal privatization program was totally destroying the country, which it was. And probably they wanted to get their piece of it, but also it was extremely unpopular what Yeltsin was doing. Extremely.
What was your intention to go there? Like, why did you just decide, okay, I'm going to Moscow, I'm going to Russia? What was your...
I had to get the fuck out of America. I couldn't take it anymore. Yeah, I just had to get the fuck out. Yeah, and Russia was like the opposite, it was on the opposite pole. It was in every which way, and it was a very fucked up country. And so I had visited there briefly, and I did not feel so fucked up there because everything around me was so fucked up. It wasn't happy Clinton Reagan land, and everything's perfect and you go into your little office job. And so a lot of things were very possible then. I mean, it was dire as hell, but also there were just a lot of possibility. There was just a lot more possibility in a way that there really wasn't by the end of the Reagan era. It didn't feel that way anyway, and it's sometimes, when you get out of your culture, like you getting out of Rochester with me, I'm from the suburbs of San Jose, which is hell. And, you just kind of can't realize yourself or something if you don't get the hell out of where you're from. So that's kind of the main reason why I was a fan of Russian literature, culture, that kind of thing. But I when I got there, it was just a lot bigger than I knew. And that kept me there. And eventually long story, but eventually I wound up starting up a newspaper there. The way Russia was being represented in the English language and in the West was, this is a country that was communist, and now it's going to become just like, middle America. And that's, it's sort of like that like inside of every Russian is a middle American mall goer just dying to come out. And it wasn't like that. It was actually extremely violent. What they were going through in these sort of Western-backed free market reforms was very violent. Millions of Russians were dying, going to their grave early, and everything being written about it was sort of like, privatization is continuing apace, but they have to tighten their belts more. And pensioners are protesting because they just don't get it, and blah, blah, blah. From my point of view, there was a huge amount of space to write about what was really going on. The Russian press it was very free at that time, probably freer than ours. I mean, the range of opinions was very free, and Russian criticism in the press of Yeltsin reforms and US back reforms was very lively and very intense. And the corruption was unfucking believable, like you've never seen, until Trump. Like,
how did you support yourself while you were there? Was it through writing? Were you by yourself, and how did you support yourself? It was much cheaper, but the food was still the food in Russia now is great, but it was terrible then.
It was terrible, but I didn't really care.
Of course not.
You could live like super cheap. I lived in a kommunalka. I lived in a communal apartment. I paid like $100 a month. And I just found odd jobs. Being an American, it was easier to find jobs. Jobs I would never take at home. I mean, I worked for, I don't know, some trading company guy, like translating. I worked for a liquor distributor, which is, as somebody said, it's like selling sand to a beach, in Russia, and made some money that way. And then I worked for this very wealthy banker guy, and I was kind of like his personal secretary for a while, and helping organize his meetings and his art. He was a big art collector and all this other shit. And I wound up getting more and more involved in that, saved up money. And then with that, like I finally couldn't take that anymore. And I started up a newspaper. I started publishing stuff elsewhere, but I was having a hard time publishing anything critical, actually. I was having a very hard time. In fact, the editor of the local kind of straight paper, the Moscow Times, which had a lot of big backing at that time, because Russia in the 90s, you may remember, was sort of like, it was the colonial project of the American empire. Like, Russia must become democratic and free and like us. And so there was a lot of money put into it. And I was writing stuff critical and I thought sort of funny, because it was so grotesque. And Russia has a good tradition of extremely grotesque writing, going back to
behavior,
Gogol,
writing, and behavior, just about everything, and literature, everything else. Yeah.
And I should add, they have probably in the world of punk, the most radical, brilliant punk, I guess even duo, but she killed herself. Yegor Leotov and Yanka Diaghilev. Adam Curtis, the filmmaker, he's like a big fan of theirs. They're both dead now, but I got really into that kind of that scene in the 90s as well. Anyway, but in the English language, no one wanted to publish my stuff after a few times, and so
because it was just too radical, or they didn't get it, or it was again misogynist, sexist, too political, satirical, all the above.
All of the misogynist, sexist, racist, blah 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 came a little bit later. This was more just offensive to expats and Americans, and I was told at the time that the editor actually told me, he's like, Moscow's a pretty sleepy business town, and what you're writing, it's like may have made sense in Hunter Thompson's time and in that milieu, but this is not that kind of era. And I was like, have you ever like walked out of your fucking, Western biosphere, because they had these like apartments that were done up Western style, so God forbid Westerners shouldn't experience Russian life at all at that time. The Exile wound up getting much bigger than it should have as a little piddly little alternative paper out of some other capital city.
And that in this day and age, you would be lynched for publishing that. I mean, it's just, I'm not even going to go into the ridiculousness of both the extremity of corruption and abuse and poverty and death, coupled with the preciousness of bullshit when there are real atrocities and things are then being reduced to, don't look at me wrong.
I know.
Don't insult me. That hurt.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to go there because we're talking about you. Come on, Tim, jump right in.
So I'm glad we got the little history and backdrop, but what were the warning shots when you
All right, so with that, yeah, so that was 2008. And I mean, it's funny, one of the first things, so, you know, we had different run-ins at different times, but this one, the first problem hit when I did this sort of 2-page picture essay of, so some of the like girls and guys who were involved in Pussy Riot later, they weren't at this time. They're in like a, this really radical, very extreme sort of performance art group called, I think they were called Vaina back then, War Vaina. And they did this thing, this performance, I guess you call it, called Fucking for Medvedev. Medvedev was the guy who briefly replaced Putin as, you know, president. He was really kind of a stand-in for a while.
Yeah, I remember.
And this was a very important, big deal thing for like official Putin culture, that Medvedev was coming in. We're all going to take him seriously, even though everyone knew, well, the only reason why you chose him is because you know this guy like is a bottomer, and you know, like he's going to do whatever the fuck you tell him to, you know. And so they did this. They actually went into these public places, literally stripped off all their clothes and fucked, and then took pictures and posted it like in museums and in some other kind of like official places. And it got them in trouble. I think a couple of them got kicked out of Moscow State University. And so I took their stuff, and they were trying to get sort of attention for that. This is including Nadia, I can't remember her whole name now, but Nadia, the main sort of figure of what later became Pussy Riot. She was one of those people involved in that. She was pregnant actually at the time. And so we published it, and it was the first time ever when we tried to get an Exile issue published at the printing press where they said, oh, no. Because what happens in Russia is when there's a change of guard, like change of guard from Yeltsin to Putin and then Putin to Medvedev, you have new people coming in, officials suddenly get really excited, and people start doing shit. They fear getting in trouble. They want to do something, whatever. So everyone was afraid. And so they wouldn't publish it. So I had to black it all out. And that got attention of people. And then my dad had a stroke. And so I came home to California. And while I was home, the Kremlin sent our office an official warning that I personally and our paper were being investigated for crime, editorial crimes, crime of pornography, indecency, inciting hatred. You know, because satire is not recognized as a valid sort of defense, as a legal defense or any kind of defense, which is now the case in this country, but no one will admit it anyway. But it pretty much is the case. So when I heard this, you know, it made me nervous because I had friends who'd been jailed and disappeared and kicked out and chased out of the country. It was kind of odd to me that they even sent this while I was out of the country. Usually that means they're sort of like firing that warning shot so that you don't come back. But I thought if I don't come back, I'm leaving all of our Russian staff there. And I'm sort of like, I didn't really understand what the hell was going on. So I figured I'll go back. And if they really don't want me, they're going to stop me at the border. And they didn't. So I actually went back, and then I went to the office and I met with the Kremlin. They actually sent 4, you know, Kremlin officials into our office to do an audit of our editorial content. And they're like looking through this and like, I mean, you know, first we had Edward Lemonov writing for us, who is this radical writer who actually was in the New York scene for a while. And he was the leader of the opposition, the anti-Putin opposition at the time. And they just sort of snarled at that. And then we had, we had stupid things too. It was like what was it called? I think it was called the recession penis or the depression penis. And it's like, it got harder as things got worse, and as things got better, it got more limp. And they're like, what is this? You know, and just sort of like writing down as I explain what the recession penis is. So it was like stupid juvenile stuff and then more serious stuff. And the whole thing was just like, they just wound up taking all these newspapers. And then I started kind of publicly fighting it, which maybe was stupid. And I started going on different Russian radio programs. And I was on with the leader of Nashi, which is the Russian youth movement. These are goons. This guy started just screaming at me and fucking saying you should be in jail. In fact, he was pissed at me for all of this, but he was also pissed at me. He's like, what about your president, George Bush? I bet you support him. I say, no, we made mincemeat of him. We did this satirical thing, that satirical, about the Iraq war is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard. And he's like, you should be in jail just for opposing your president's war. Every person should support their president.
Oh my God.
And then shortly, like right after that, I got a call at my house from some people and saying, you should pack your bags and get the fuck out now. And I had already kind of prepared for this moment just in case with some guys that I knew who had been forced out. And they said, when you leave, and I did this, just pack one small bag, go to the airport, buy a one-way ticket there at the airport and get the fuck out. And that's what I did. And I think I met Tim, a few months after that.
Afterwards, yeah.
Yeah, thank God.
Here-
I flew to London. Like the first ticket I could get was to London. So it was fucked up. It was very fucked up. And I lost that paper. It was a real business too. And so I was dirt poor all of a sudden, like completely broke.
How much long after that did Grove Atlantic decide to publish like a compendium of it? Or
no, that was before.
That was before. Okay.
Yeah, that was before. We just kept the Exile going. That
Okay.
Grove was about our first year or 2 years.
Okay.
We lasted 10 years, amazingly enough.
Which is amazing. So now you're busted and back in New York. What year is that?
So that's 2008. And journalism has been fucked. I mean, I did a lot of writing for The Nation, but you can't really make money that way to live in a big city. And
well, that's exactly the problem. I mean, with real journalism and the kind that you're doing, you're investigating not only corruption but politics. It takes so much energy and so much time,
and money,
and brain, leak and you don't really get what you should get out of it. Even you might get the readership, it doesn't mean you're getting the money for it. It's actually so horrifyingly underpaid, even for major newspapers or magazines.
And so, like, it's basically opinion pieces now, and it's cult of personality, maybe, or luck, or who knows, at least how I'm seeing is who are kind of quote unquote succeeding. Did the others stay in Moscow when you just left? Did you let them know?
I let them know, and I told them all this time, but the focus was on me because I was a somewhat well-known asshole, in Moscow, certainly in the Moscow scene. I mean, in both Russian and the English world, and so and I was also editor. So the actual Kremlin charges, against me for violations, which a couple of them were punishable with jail. I mean, my name was on it. It was me and the paper that would be sanctioned. So they weren't in that kind of danger. But really, that's why I went back, because I'm not going to I could have stayed home if I was a total dick and never gone out there. And then they might have, focused on my other colleagues there, Russian and American. But after that whole thing went down, I told everybody I was leaving because I was specifically targeted. And I got the hell out. And Yasha Levine, he stayed a little bit longer, and then he had couple bad situations like a month or two later, and he left. But we were the last two Americans with the paper at that time. And the Russians did fine afterwards. They wound up getting rich after that.
Oh, wow. So you said, was Matt attacked, you said?
So, no, Matt got attacked once, but Matt was with the paper for the first 5 years.
Okay.
Right. So he was there. He was with us from 97 to 2002, 2 or 3, and then the last 5 years it was me with some other people. Yeah, me and Yash Levine, me and a guy who was the editor at New York Press, and just me with some other people. Well, Alex Zaitchik was with
yes, Alex Zaitchik. Okay,
he was on your show actually. Yeah, listen. Yeah.
So Mark, you've been on. I don't think MSNBC and all this stuff. So, you know a lot about geopolitical situations, particularly involving Russia and all that stuff. I want to talk about Ukraine. I also want to talk about Belarus. I'm sure you're following that to a degree at this point.
To a degree.
But
yeah.
That's kind of a different, but there's a interconnection. It seems like, I don't know what, the information
Somewhat.
I get.
Yeah. I mean, well, look, they're all neighbors and they're all dealing with post-Soviet shit, and they're all important kind of battlegrounds for NATO versus Russia, I guess you'd say. So yeah, so they do share those things. They've gone in different paths, but there's definitely a lot of overlap. But yeah,
Well, isn't it fair to say, like what I've read is that something like Russia owned like 80% of Ukraine's debt, and then of course, you know, Ukraine's corrupt and they have the problem. Their economy wasn't growing for 20 years, and then, you know, whatever opportunity when their, I forget his name, their president or their prime minister basically was like the one that was the coup, the one that was
overthrown.
The one that was overthrown. Yeah,
Yanukovych.
He was thrown, and basically he was like, I'm siding with Russia because, well, they touch Russia. Russia owns their debt. And then basically that's when the shit goes down, including America supporting the Svoboda Party, which is pretty much the most, maybe the most fascist party. Yeah, exactly.
I know. It's nuts. I mean, yeah, the problem here is that and this has always been going on, like when we were reporting about Russia in the 90s, you know, there were the good Yeltsin pro-Western, pro-reformers and the bad communists or bad, these stupid sort of binaries, and it doesn't really work like that. But with Yanukovych, look, Yanukovych was very corrupt. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. Yanukovych was, I mean, to put it crudely, I guess, you know, he was more, well, he came from the sort of more pro-Russian East Donbass region of the country. It's where a lot of the money is, a lot of the sort of the mining and factories and so on is in that part of the country. And a lot of Russian, I guess you call it Russian speakers that have always been a lot more partial to Russia. And, you know, when the Soviet Union split apart, Ukraine, like in 1991 or 90, was pretty much even with Russia. But Russia took off, especially in the Putin years in a big way. And Ukraine never did. Ukraine, in fact, I don't think it's ever really kind of caught up to where it was in a GDP per capita sense to where it was in like 89, 90, 91. It's really a basket case, no matter who's running it. But in any event, Yanukovych was, he was not into bringing Ukraine into NATO, which is actually one of the main points of contention. There was a big sort of battle at that moment, late 2013, where the EU was telling Yanukovych, we can sign this sort of trade agreement with you and we'll bring you sort of partly into the EU, which is something that's very, very popular in Ukraine. They'd all love to be in the EU if they could. The deal was terrible. So if they agreed to it, the austerity programs they'd have to do and the cuts and to government, and like all this crap was going to be really awful. And Putin came up with a sweet offer, which was, if you actually join our Eurasian Union, whatever the hell it's called, you know, we're going to give you like $5 billion worth of gas. We're also going to kick back, obviously, you know, this amount to you and your buddies. And so for political reasons, among others, Yanukovych chose to go with the Russian deal. And then when that happened, immediately this Maidan protest movement started. And what made it different from the Orange Revolution 10 years earlier is you had these straight up fascists,
yeah,
front and center, torchlight, skinhead, Nazi fascists, like,
and they're wearing the what's the guy's Banderas, the guy, who's basically like, even for Hitler, he was like, that guy's a little too extreme for me back in the day.
He's look, who carried out the Holocaust? It was the Einsatzgruppen and their Ukrainian auxiliaries, right? The police and all the guards and everything. And the big part of the Holocaust. And who were those Ukrainian auxiliaries? They were part of Bandera's group.
Right.
And they sort of moved back and forth to collaborating with Germany because they both had the same enemies, Jews and communists. And Bandera was a straight up fascist. He was a Führer. And it's actually completely nuts. And we don't hear about this. I mean,
we don't. I was always very upset. And this is during the Obama years. You know, obviously we're now in Trump is another thing, but I was like, I don't think this is really fair.
I got to say, it made me crazy. And in these years, in sort of the last like few years, I did very little writing because I focused a lot more on family stuff, and I'm hoping I'm finally coming out of that now. But you know, family stuff kind of kept me from having that time to write. So I would just kind of read it and comment on it, and you know, podcasting, which is a little easier than actually
seething
writing. Seething my fucking brains out.
I want to ask you this, considering myself at one point the liver of America.
like
because I mean, since Reagan, I've been had the bullhorn to my mouth, and the podcast is a great place to do that, especially in the intros, because again, nobody can't take it to the stage anymore. But with the uprise of fascism, I mean, do you think that because it is really an uprising right now, do you think it's just a cyclical thing, or because this is ridiculous? I mean, I think so much of what's happening. First of all, there's the top priority is classism, bigger than racism, because really it's the rich cunts that are killing and ruining everything. And then there's this fascism, which is to me just based on fear of other. But like colonialization, like these trends, like the way that the war is a virus that circles the globe. I mean, and America is fascist. Can we please admit it? And the one reason I left America to go to live in Barcelona was because as America was going into fascism under the stealing of the second election under Bush, I went to Spain, which at that time was out of fascism for a while. And of course, everything seemed to be going back to this ridiculous fear-based hatred of others. Do you think that this uprising fascism is just a cyclical thing? Is it just in the blood, the idiocy of human beings who don't learn from the past? I mean, this is we don't learn from the past. We just keep repeating it. It's just so pathetic that at 2020, and as we were saying about you're seething. Yes, we're seething because every day it's more fucking ridiculous in this country. And, I go back to what I was writing under Reagan. It's no different. It's just worse.
Yeah, exactly. I know that's the thing. People are like, this has never happened. Well, it is. It's Reagan, but worse, as you said, like in so many ways. If you were cognizant at all in the Reagan years, it's very familiar, in the worst possible way. But I gotta say, like, I mean, some version of fascism, but kind of covered up with a smile or a sort of proper manners, let's say, has been really dominant for most of my life. What surprised me is the actual costume, like in the costume out on the street, like the Charlottesville thing, like that shit, we had that when I was younger, but the rallies were really small and the people in it was like hills have eyes. And you knew that they were kind of there basically to make it seem like, oh, we've defeated that. And that doesn't exist anymore, KKK guys, whatever. But you knew a different version of fascism was around. It's really bizarre and I gotta say, it's surprising to me to see how big actual costume.
The stupidity of fucking human beings is not surprising to me. It's why I never get road rage. Then again, I don't drive. It's like the stupidity and ignorance, and it's all fear-based, is what makes people think others are less and that they're better. If they'd only realize that they all came from a black woman. Probably, yes, hello. Actually, from fucking chimpanzees.
Yeah.
Realize, just because you came from other fucking apes, do you have to still act like it? I don't understand how we have not progressed as a culture, which is why we're killing everything. Because basically, we are inherently killers.
Yeah, we're nasty. I think what you said
I prefer
earlier,
to keep the nasty in the bedroom. Carry on.
Exactly. I think what you said earlier is right, though. I mean, look, there's, you look at a lot of these places, there's massive inequality. And this is true in Ukraine. Ukraine has oligarchs and then fucking everybody is shit poor and pensioners. And it makes you bitter and pissed. And then you might briefly kind of buy into sort of liberalism because it promises also material benefits, and it doesn't give you material benefits. It just shames you. So, and it's like, and there's no left allowed. I mean, the one thing that both parties, like in this country, do, and they do this everywhere, they both make sure they quash any kind of like real populist left uprising. Any like too much democracy, as they all agree, is really bad. So what's left? It's this sort of, fuck it, let's tear it all down then, and I think this is where some of it comes from.
What about just the tech revolution? Just the Russian Revolution, American Civil War, two world wars are kind of like these spin-offs of the anxieties and who's going to direct the Industrial Revolution. Now, the infrastructure is not there, but the tech revolution's arrived, and don't you think that's also part of the turbulence here?
It's definitely been an accelerant, but I think underlying it all is just it's inequality. I mean, that's what I wrote my book Going Postal. Now I've been 10, 15 years now. about office shootings and school shootings. And I think it's borne out is that inequality. Well, back then we didn't talk about inequality, but inequality creates pathologies. Inequality for obvious reasons, man. When you can't get things, when you can't get healthcare, when you can't get.
We just go back in American history. So, yeah, Italians, Irish, Polish, etc. It's like whoever is the next, and this country is based on immigrants, the next victim, it's really the next victim in line. Like what I don't get is that there's the statistic today that I just quoted in the intro is like 56% of Americans are now unemployed. That's a statistic they don't want you to know. And the thing is, it is classist. And if all of the impoverished would realize, why are you going after people that are poorer? Why are you going after people that will take the jobs that you don't want to take? What is your fucking fear-based problem? This is what's so frustrating to me is like, if all of the poor would realize, and that's most of us, there has to be some kind of, I don't mind saying it, there has to be a fucking overthrow. And people in positions of power in Congress should not be million and billionaires. They're not speaking for you or me. Carry on, Mark Ames.
No, look, man, I agree. It's actually shocking to me. You know, you look back at like previous ruling classes who eventually were overthrown, whether, you know, like the Russian ruling class that was overthrown in 1917 or the French ruling class, and what fucking dumb shits they were, how because they had it all and they couldn't share just a little bit just to calm people down, right? They actually saw another opportunity because they are what they are. They're just sort of like, well, they're predators and that's what they're going to do. They're going to keep eating meat. And you look at our ruling class and you're like, you know, if you just gave everybody health care like they do in every country on fucking earth, you would calm this shit down so fast. But I'm telling you, they can't do it. It's like I can't fly, and they can't do that.
Well, and that's the hardest. That's the hardest thing for me. Well, that's the hardest thing for me about Biden is the only thing he says is I'm not Trump. If he just gave
he also says I'm not a socialist.
Oh well, and he also says I'm pro fracking. I mean,
I just wish that somebody would ask Trump if he knows what a socialist is, if he knows what it means, because he fucking doesn't. And the thing is, you can only hope that with Biden, Grandpa, that he will listen to people more rational and more in tune with the reality of things than he is. At least Elizabeth Warren, who knows more about banking than just about any person on the planet, which is why they try to keep her out of the fucking game.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I know. I mean, they made sure that they quashed Warren and Sanders. And
well, Sanders didn't have a price, and the word is Elizabeth Warren did by staying in the race on that Super Tuesday.
Because I've been a fan of Warren's for a long time, and
everyone's got him priced.
really bummed me out.
The thing is, she is the one who can actually let her speak for a couple of hours because she could lay the whole system out. She knows more about the inequality of banking in this country than just about anybody, which is why they said, okay, just go over there. Get over there, please.
But she did do a big solid for Biden.
Oh, she did a solid. Hypothetical thing, Mark. What do you think is what would be worse? And it doesn't have to be this situation. But what do you think is worse? A lifetime position.
Door number one.
The lifetime position in the Supreme Court, referring to Barrett, is that going to, you think, going to cause more damage than, say, hypothetically, another 4 years of Trump, and say she wasn't in it, for instance?
Both things are going to be eliminated right now, please. I mean, really. I'm just going to put in my mantra here. This is my mantra. I have to say it. Read between the lines, Mark. Black, vet, amputee, sniper. That's been my mantra for a few weeks. Enough said.
Why hasn't it happened? And
I guess my prayers are not heard, like most prayers are not heard, because there's nobody fucking listening to them. Carry on.
Trump, if you're really honest about it, he causes chaos and he's super corrupt, but he's also really incompetent. Where, Supreme Court justice is,
but he's by being there, he has packed the courts.
Yes, he has.
Very far right wing. I don't even think
generations.
And I don't even think W's like John Roberts is almost a liberal compared to some.
Oh my God, I can't fucking believe it.
So he's doing lasting damage in that way. That's why Koch, who's made a big show of being a maneuver Trumper too, he's funding the shit out of these judicial appointments.
I don't even think Trump knows what he do. I don't even think Trump really understands what he's doing on any level. He's just a pathological projector.
His presence is a problem.
Absolutely. And now he's so pathetically desperate. It's great. Steroids. I hope he dies of a fucking Big Mac attack. And his Stepford wife.
I'm so pissed that the cytokine storm never came. No, that's it. When you get the fucking, when you get access to experimental drugs because you're rich like that, it's just it ain't fair.
Do we believe he even
I was like,
had
come
it?
on, cytokine storm.
Look, the only thing he's a super spreader of is incredible lies, constant projection, and bullshit, and then just enough said.
Yeah. So but back to your question, I would say this, like. Actually, the answer is I don't know. They both fucking suck. I think the reality is this: he's gonna lose. I mean, he's just polling really badly because of the virus. And let's be honest, if it wasn't the virus, he might win.
He probably would have won.
But the virus is beating him.
I wish the virus would win. I wish the virus would win. That is the virus against him.
Yeah, I mean, we all all decent people were praying for that. Even those of us who don't believe in praying. And she's going to be in, and that's that. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't see a hypothetical there because the reality is he's not going to win unless like something, if you look back at polling with Hillary, I know everybody was acting like it was 9/11 after Trump won, but you actually look back at the polling, they were actually a lot closer. I think it was just that in our minds, nobody, probably including that dipshit Trump, could imagine that Trump was going to win. He thought he was going to have like a big media empire after this or something. But
you know what? And he won't have a big one after this because nobody's going to want to fucking touch him.
I disagree.
I hope so.
I think a lot of no matter what.
That's true.
You ask about the fascist thing like that. That genie's out of the bottle.
Well, he can get $10 from all the MAGA billies, and go ahead.
Yep. They'll pay money, and I think there's going to be some violence too.
Oh, I don't think the violence is stopping anytime soon.
Yeah.
And things are very unsettled. Just like you, going back to what you're both saying.
The Biden thing is the Biden presidency is not going to solve.
No.
And that's the thing we're going to find out is that Trump is a symptom much more, he's an accelerant too.
I like to say a byproduct. I'd say he's a byproduct.
Yeah, he is. He's a byproduct. And so we're going to find out that all these same problems are not going away. And Biden will be, I assume, significantly better on domestic stuff, but not nearly good enough. He's not going to solve shit. He's going to try and use the same solutions that Obama and Hillary and stuff, which kind of like just weren't as bad as the other guy, is the best you could say.
And the problem goes back to this, the inherent violence, ignorance, stupidity, and greed of the average, I'm sorry to say it, call me sexist, male.
It is male.
With a gun. Yeah. And the patriarchy, which has been fucking ruining this entire planet and trying to kill everybody in it for millennia. This is the fucking problem. Now, I'm not saying you should have fear of a female planet, but on my planet, you would fucking fear me because we would be armed. Why the women aren't armed? Look, violence is always in the hands of the wrong fucking people. The same with the ammunition, the same with the bombs. Now, I'm not saying there's any right hands to control the violence, but this shit has got to fucking turn around. And you know what? It won't. So get used to it, kids, because we're stuck in it.
Let me just add something.
And you know what? I kind of enjoy it because it's exactly as I said it. I've said this all along, same as it ever fucking was. If you think it's going to change, pray for a new tomorrow, if only.
I should add that women are pretty good shots as a rule.
Excuse me.
Snipers.
I'm trained. Excuse me. I'm trained. Yes, I am.
I mean, dudes should not go shooting because I've done this with chicks because girls are always better.
Cops won't go shooting with me.
Yeah.
I've asked.
Sucks. Yeah.
So speaking of shooting, what's your theory about the Dutch plane that went down over Ukraine? I mean, is it pretty much agreed upon that was a Russian fuck up, or
it was a Russian fuck up? I mean, anything again is possible, but I was following that story pretty closely at the time, and pro-Russian separatists, and we could talk about the whole background of that story and stuff, but where that story was very badly reported in the West, very badly, as if there wasn't genuine anti-Maidan, anti-Kyiv sentiment in the pro-Russian East of the country. It was very real. Russia helped them, there's no doubt, but it was also very real, and it went back to the days of independence. But anyway, they had shot down, so Ukraine was sending out big troop transport planes and big planes like that over that very same area before that looked like passenger planes. And they were shot down, and they would post in their videos, the Russian separatists would, cheering that they shot it down. And then you have this Malaysian jet flying over. And you ask me if there's any conspiracy that has been covered up. And in fact, I hear that this is constantly an issue in the Netherlands itself. Is that why did Ukraine allow a passenger plane to fly over? Now, there's been all this disinformation that's gone out about, that maybe it was a Ukrainian jet shot it down and blamed it on the. I don't buy it. I mean, it's just, you'd have to prove that to me. I remember watching it when it happened, seeing the first videos posted, because the dudes who shot it down were boasting it. They thought it was another Antonov or whatever, troop cargo jet. And then they found out, oh shit, it's a passenger plane, and they start taking their videos down. So I wrote about it right when it happened. I mean, so that was
tragic. I mean, you think what about Malaysian Airlines? You think they're just being cheap and they fucking wanted to save the fuel?
It could be. But to get into like the really bad reporting. So after that happened, I remember New York Magazine ran a huge piece claiming that, the other Malaysian Airlines plane that just like,
just kept on going.
Yeah. New York Magazine actually ran a giant article saying this is when like we blamed everything on Putin, like cartoons are a Russian danger, but Russians are getting into your mind and into our bodily fluids. And they said that Putin somehow has people like hijack that plane and land it somewhere. And they had maps in Kazakhstan. Like, Russia was responsible for everything then. But in this case, as far as I know, as far as I can tell, they definitely were.
Wait, was it takeover Crimea after the plane went down, or was that during?
No. The takeover Crimea was almost right after that Maidan revolution. I mean,
right.
Genuine neo-Nazis took over Kyiv and Crimea, which had been holding referendums since like 91 or 92 to try to go join with Russia because it was historically Russian and it's a majority Russian population. They were for it. There's no doubt they were for it. And politically, Putin would have been really damaged by the Maidan revolution if he didn't do something big. It was surprising to me. Putin's usually very conservative, very, very, very conservative. He isn't anymore. He hasn't been lately, like Syria and that. But you take over territory that you think that you have a friendly local population in. I mean, when you take over territory with a hostile population, you're screwed for a long time.
Yes, good point.
Yeah.
Mark, I have to ask you this. Tim, we obsess on this shit all the time, daily, decades and decades worth of obsessing on the incorrect way to run a city, a country, a planet. What do you do to turn it off? Can you turn it off?
Yeah, I think if you've got a lot of discipline, which I don't have, you can turn it off.
Maybe having kids was your way a little bit.
It's just they've replaced one like total anxiety with it while you're having to attend to something you're terrified for, or two things, and in the background all this other shit's going on, and you want to fight it or rant about it or say some shit about it, and even if you know how feckless it is, nevertheless you want to do it. And you're just full of anxiety about not doing it. And then you go on social media to do something. And then you realize on social media, all it does is fucking wind you up 20 times more. And then your kid has some other problem you have to deal with. It's like, suicide sometimes is a very fucking rational, very rational. But anyway,
it's completely understandable. But the biggest job that you have now in this time of mass mania on all levels is to present to your children, which whether there was a gun to your head or not, you chose to have, they have to be exposed to beauty.
Yeah.
And that's the most important and a very difficult thing. I myself rebel with pleasure. Night falls, get the fuck out of my political landscape. I'm a hedonist. I need and love friends and a very small coven. Drugs, sex, rock and roll. And I need to find the beauty to erase the death, destruction, and stupidity that we are bombarded with every minute of the day, especially in this climate of the most pathetic president, super spreader, idiotic, soulless, narcissistic, maniacal cunt, bioterrorist, and his Stepford wife and kids. All I'm saying, we're all trying to deal right now. And excuse me, that $182 they're sending us, fuck you. Because you know what? They could solve the problem. And the problem would be, don't give the fucking tax breaks to all the richest cunts that don't need it. Give people the money to stimulate the economy, because we can't go anywhere. And if you don't, 56% unemployment, how many people are going to be homeless? Come back to me and check on that in a couple of months. Yeah. This country has such an incredible amount of poverty, which is just swept under the fucking rug. It's not going away. And then we have an asshole who pretends he's a billionaire who owes $400 million to God knows fucking who. Mitch fucking McConnell with his wife owning more money than anybody deserves. We need to raid the banks. That's
Absolutely. I love Lydia's rants. I'm sorry, man. They're like, preach, sister. Like, seriously. I mean, and you know, I've heard, I don't know. There are different, it's hard to have your hatred of Trump kind of stand out and be inspiring, but yours inspires me. I mean, it's like,
oh, I'm so glad you love my hatred.
Yes,
because I fucking mean it. And it's not only him. The thing is, he's just another symbol of a fucking asshole man in a position of power that should be fucking taken out. And you know what? It's got to be snuffed out. The fucking cancer has got to be cut. The thing is, the knife is not big enough to cut all the cancer out. So, hello.
But still, cut it out anyway.
Thank you very much. I cut it out when the night falls. Yeah. Oh, if only my gun was big enough.
So, Tim, you were going to ask me
I was, the rant, you help the rant can sustain. That's it.
He hears it all the time.
Any insights on Belarus right now?
It's, it's pretty amazing, I got to say. I mean, well, put it this way. I guess the long and the short of it is Belarusians are fucked no matter what. They voted in Lukashenko in 1994 because they were experiencing what, like, for example, Russians were experiencing under Yeltsin, which was mass privatization. Everybody got impoverished. A few people suddenly got privatized riches, and chaos and crime and all this shit. And they thought, we want to vote in somebody who's going to stop this, who is not for this massive neoliberalization program. We don't care. This is what we want. And that's why they voted in Lukashenko. And he was quite popular for a long time. He actually did stop it. He set up this kind of like state, quasi-socialist, quasi-capitalist political economy. Not much political freedom, not a whole lot of press freedom, but society was stabilized. And I mean, just as an example, Belarusians, their GDP per capita is about twice where Ukraine is. Right?
Amazing.
I mean,
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah,
well, considering the resources Ukraine has, it's
amazing. Exactly. It's sick. And that's because the inequality was nowhere near the level. Ukraine has been backed by the West in a big way. And transformed by Western advisors and Western money and so on. Ukraine is, just massively unequal and just a deeply fucked up country. Belarusians had this guy Lukashenko all this time. And meanwhile, if somebody tried to really challenge him, people would get disappeared. I mean, he's a thug. And he would win his elections every 5 years by like 80%. And this time around, I think it's just, it's too long. And he started jailing people who presented a threat to him. There was a pro-Russian guy, I don't have his name in front of me right now.
Well, I mean, basically what I'm getting at is how much influence is, NATO, the West, and is it yet again another tug of war between Russia and NATO and the West, or is this a little different? You're already saying it is different. But
no, I would say this. It's inevitable in a country like Belarus, which borders a bunch of NATO countries now. We expanded NATO right up to Russia's border.
And Clinton lied about, which he lied.
Deliberately, and George Bush Sr. lied about too. Deliberately did that to piss off Russia in order to then require us to buy more weapons from American weapon manufacturer to battle this Russian monster. But anyway, so it borders all these NATO countries. So it inevitably is going to be involved NATO to some degree.
Right.
But the anger, the grievances are very real. I mean, Belarusians are not known to be angry and
aggressive.
Like they were pushed beyond a point. I mean, somebody said if Lukashenko had stolen the election in a way that said like he won 55%, let's say, and the opposition won 45%. Like, it might not have brought out that level of absolute fury and anger. There's no doubt that like opposition people have connections to people in NATO countries like Lithuania and Poland and Ukraine, the Maidan people in Ukraine, and that are kind of heating it up. But still, you need genuine grievances to get it this big against that sort of deeply entrenched of a dictator. It's such a broad-based kind of democratic movement. So I'm of two minds. I mean, look, but here's the reality. Either, and I should add too that Russia really doesn't like Lukashenko and hasn't liked him.
Okay, I was wondering about that
for quite a long time, and they have their guy that they would like. And Lukashenko jailed him in June, and that's when Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, sort of, you know, the woman who's the wife of the blogger, and she became a big deal sort of after that. The main opposition guy is a banker and kind of closer to the Kremlin, I would guess. But look, there's three options. Either Lukashenko fully stays in power, and he's going to do that with a lot of blood, and people are going to be fucked because they're not going to have freedom. The opposition guy who's more pro-Russian is maybe takes over and goes into power. What that's going to mean is that Russian oligarchs then wind up snapping up a lot of that business, and Belarusians are going to become way more unequal. Or the third option is Tikhanovskaya, the one who's backed by the West and gets all the great press out here. Maybe she takes over, and then you have hardcore neoliberal privatization, and basically half of Belarusians are going to become gastarbeiter, you know, migrant workers in the rich EU countries. And so the country is fucked no matter what. And that's, I don't mean to be a downer.
No.
That's who I am. That's what I do for a living.
Excuse me. Don't mean to be a downer. You are not responsible for any of this. Yeah. Well, can you recommend, like, where do you get a lot of your information? Like, what like news sources do you actually have some respect for that are out there that you can recommend? That you can recommend. Besides, and then I want to talk about Radio War Nerd. But what sources can you recommend or respect that are out there right now for people to get information, just in general? You know,
I mean, you know what? Something I've learned in general. I mean, I would say that there are a couple of outlets and some journalists that I really do respect and like.
Well, do tell us.
Well, your man Alex Zaitchik, who was on recently, is great. He doesn't cover this story in particular. There's the site called Declassified in Britain. Matt Kennard and Mark Curtis and their people, Phil Miller, they do really good stuff. Gray Zone guys do really, Max Blumenthal, Anya, Aaron, Matt, like there are some sites that are more challenging of narratives than others. So like those are a couple of them. Otherwise, you know, it's more like how you read stories.
How you read? Well, you're fluent in Russian, which probably helps you get many different perspectives as well, even if it's bullshit. But yeah,
and some of that's bullshit too. I mean, it's more like filtering. I mean, I think it's all bullshit because the New York Times and the Washington Post are like so wildly fuck up or slant so many stories, but a lot of times they do really good work too. Or even in the stories that are wildly slanted, there's
I have to say, look, the Washington Post has done some really good in-depth. I really like the thing they did a few years ago on Surveillance Society, which was like a 12-part series.
That was really good. Yeah.
That was really good. I mean, they do, and they do hate Trump but then they also, you know, they're not as hateful as they should be, in my opinion.
They have a lot of good reporters, and you just kind of have to know how to read them. I sometimes feel like official culture in this country, it's a bit like how we used to look at Soviet culture. It's sort of like you have to know how to read it and read between the lines, and you get information. I honestly can't say. I mean, we talk about this a lot on Radio War Nerd on the podcast I do with John Dolan.
And when does that air? Tell us a little bit about that. And how long has it been going? And what is it about? Tell us a bit about that. That's your latest thing.
Yeah, the War Nerd was a character that we invented at the Exile, 15 years ago, because everybody in America after 9/11 suddenly became like this armchair general. And so we created a character who was just an absolute nihilist, but got things right. And John Dolan, who was sort of like my writing mentor, poet from the Bay Area, he actually came up with the name The Exile for the paper that Matt and I ran. We started this podcast like 5 years ago to just look at wars. You know, I'd say again, like it was a lot more nihilistic when we started the War Nerd in in the Exile, and John wrote it, and it's brilliant.
Wait, excuse me. Wait a minute. It was more nihilistic than what? Than the actual reality of the nihilism that exists in the fucking world that is urging death on the entire planet.
I know.
No,
that's the point. What it is like, you know, one thing you learn in writing and rhetoric is, you know, you do have to have a sense of your audience, and you do want to bash your audience some, but you also can't lose them. You know, you gotta bash them and then sort of like stroke them a little bit, and then bash them again, and then stroke them and slap them in the face, wake them up again.
I prefer to stroke my musicians occasionally than the entire audience. I don't have enough hands, but if I did, trust me, I'd be out there just saying, all right, 5 years ago, you started Radio War Nerd, and it's still going, which is great.
And it's still going, and it's like, you know, the weird thing about it is, I mean, I've been doing this for so long, and it's always so hard to make money in journalism and writing. And this thing actually kind of it turns out like all the fans that we'd kind of built up over the years wound up supporting us. And when we started this thing on Patreon, it's called Radio War Nerd. We started it up just sort of thinking this will be something on the side to help, you know, to help kind of supplement the shit money we make in journalism. And it wound up kind of taking over, and I really love it. I mean, it's very alive, and we do, like, just in the last few days, we have this Bahraini guy who's doing with us a 4-part series on the Arab conquests of the 7th and 8th century, starting with Muhammad and the rise of Islam, and like, you know, this like Arab like little tribe just all of a sudden pours out of Arabia out of nowhere, and the Sassanids and the Byzantines, they're like, ha ha ha, you can't, and they just fucking cut through them like a knife, you know, and create this massive empire. And then the next day we had on, just a couple of days ago, a young Armenian journalist in Nagorno-Karabakh, where this war is going on.
Yeah.
She's literally like playing for us recordings of what it's like
to
be in a basement while these bombs are dropping from Azerbaijan, which is backed by the second biggest NATO military, you know, Turkey, our ally Turkey, is arming Azerbaijan to bomb these Armenians. Turkey, of course, did a fucking genocide of Armenians.
Yes, a famous one.
I mean, it's where the word, I think.
And they're still denying it, right? Or
yeah. Oh yeah, no.
Well, I mean, again, as if not putting most of the world into abject fucking poverty is enough of a war, then we still have to use bombs to kill people, which is just so prehistoric. It's so archaic. I mean, we are already poor. Most people are desperate. We're dying. We're sick. What more do you fucking want? You got us.
No, they're psychopaths. I mean, you know, we're ruled over by freaks. They're absolute
and
fucking
we're
freaks.
supposed to be.
I know. That's because this is a big new meme that like a new sort of thing that John and I keep saying, like, I thought I was the nihilist. You know, these people are the real fucking
You know what?
thing,
we are the fucking hysterians of history, which has become hysterical. We are the fucking journalists that have to expose and express what we do, because otherwise our heads would be exploding.
Absolutely.
And if only our heads were big enough to explode and take out all those that we want to get rid of with us, that would be an accomplishment. But you know what? Our heads are just not that big, literally or figuratively.
I like the idea of a suicide head exploding. Just show up at the press conference.
Well, I loved 100
scanners.
I loved 100 suicidal squirrels, but that's just what I do in my spare time. Anyway, we're coming to the close of this. Radio War Nerd, Mark Ames. Misunderstood throughout the ages. Now, you better fucking understand what he's talking about, because basically on many fronts, he's always been right, even when he's been considered a misogynist, adolescent, sexist, racist cunt. Hey, just like me. What do you know? Sometimes you just can't fucking stand it, but you're going to get it anyway, because the truth hurts. And obviously, it has never hurt as much as it is now.
Yeah. Poor feelings.
Mark, thanks.
Wait, hold on to your head. No, I'm so with you, man. I can't tell you, but I love your rants, Lydia. They're just great.
Thank you very much. You should feel my hand job sometime. I meant my hand signals. Okay. No, I fucking didn't. Hey, night comes, we need pleasure. It's the only thing we have left that's going to save us from the encroaching horror that is our everyday existence if your fucking mind is open. And that's why we do shit like this. I guess to kind of fucking relieve you, but let's just consider this podcast kind of a mental blowjob for everybody out there. Just consider my soothing tones to be that little bit of relief, you know. I mean, this is not ASMR. A little bit of soothing relief, because, you know, as Kafka said, there is hope, but not for us.
I love that. That's good.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. This was great.
Mark Ames, Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, the Lydian Spin.